There are things women respond to long before they ever agree with them. Not ideas, not opinions, not explanations, states. Most men are trained to chase clarity, to ask, to confirm, to define. But attraction doesn't grow in clarity. It grows in tension between what is felt and what is left unresolved. And the uncomfortable truth is this: the more a man tries to be understood, the less he is felt. Here's the question most men avoid asking themselves. When was the last time a woman reacted to your presence before you spoke? Not because you tried, but because something about you unsettled her internal balance. That reaction is not coincidence, it is not luck, and it is not charm. It is the result of psychological conditions that operate below language. Most men believe women respond to effort, to availability, to emotional transparency. So they explain themselves early. They narrate intentions. They rush to remove uncertainty. And without realizing it, they dismantle the very mechanisms that create interest. Because the human mind does not invest in what is fully revealed. It invests in what resists immediate resolution. First revelation. Women are not drawn to what is impressive. They are drawn to what is dense. Density is not mystery as an act. It is not silence as a trick. It is the psychological weight of a man whose inner world is not leaking outward. Most men overflow. They externalize thoughts, emotions, plans, insecurities, all at once. They believe openness creates connection, but openness without containment creates predictability, and predictability collapses curiosity. A man becomes readable too fast, and once something is fully readable, it stops being mentally active. Here is what actually happens internally. When a woman cannot fully read a man, not because he hides, but because he doesn't spill, her mind begins to fill in the gaps. Projection begins, meaning accumulates, and the more her own psyche invests, the more relevance he gained, without effort. This is not manipulation. This is how the unconscious works. The mind hates unfinished structures. It tries to complete them. And the man who does not rush to complete himself for her becomes psychologically engaging. Most men panic in this space. They feel the silence and interpret it as danger. They rush to explain who they are, what they want, where this is going. And in doing so, they relieve her nervous system of all tension. Tension is not conflict. Tension is unresolved attention. Remove it too early, and interest collapses. Contrast. The common man speaks to be liked. The grounded man speaks when necessary. The common man fills pauses. The grounded man allows pauses to exist. The common man reacts to uncertainty with reassurance. The grounded man remains internally stable, and stability is not comforting, it is commanding. This leads to the second pattern. Second revelation. Women respond differently to men who choose than to men who try. Trying is noisy. Choosing is quiet. Trying communicates urgency, even when masked as kindness. Choosing communicates self-sufficiency, and the nervous system reads this instantly. A man who tries behaves as if the interaction defines him. A man who chooses behaves as if the interaction is optional, and optionality changes the entire power structure. This is where most men misunderstand autonomy. They believe autonomy means distance, coldness, withdrawal. It does not. Autonomy is internal. It is the absence of emotional dependency on outcomes. A man can be present without being invested, engaged without being attached. And that balance destabilizes expectations, because desire responds more strongly to the possibility of loss than to the certainty of possession. When a woman senses that a man's life continues, intact, centered, unshaken, regardless of her reaction, a subtle recalibration occurs. She is no longer the evaluator. She becomes the participant. And participation creates emotional involvement. Studies in behavioral psychology consistently show that perceived autonomy increases perceived value. Not because autonomy is impressive, but because it signals internal order. Order implies direction implies leadership, and leadership is felt long before it is recognized. Most men lose this not by being rejected, but by over-investing early. They compress timelines. They escalate prematurely. They behave as if continuity must be secured, And the moment continuity becomes a need, leverage disappears. The man who chooses does not announce his independence. He demonstrates it by not rearranging himself to be accepted. He keeps his pace, his rhythm, his internal axis, and rhythm is authority. This leads to the third pattern, the most misunderstood of all. Third revelation, introduced not fully rescrita. There are men who intensify environments and men who organize them. Intensity excites briefly. Organization calms deeply, and calm creates trust at the nervous system level. A man whose presence reduces internal noise becomes rare, because most people bring chaos with them. Women often describe this as feeling grounded around someone without knowing why. Nothing dramatic happens, nothing flashy is said. Time behaves differently. Attention narrows. External distractions fade. This is not charisma, this is regulation. Psychologically, this occurs when one nervous system is stable enough to entrain another. The calmer system becomes the reference point, and reference points shape experience. The man who carries this does not compete for attention. Attention settles around him. He does not demand focus. He becomes the frame, and frames define meaning. At this stage, attraction is no longer transactional, it is atmospheric. And atmosphere cannot be faked. Most men attempt to do these things. They copy behaviors, adopt postures, practice silence. But without internal alignment, the body betrays the act. True density, autonomy, and presence emerge only when a man stops negotiating his value internally. This is why insight alone is not enough. Understanding the pattern does not equal embodying it, and this is where the real division happens. Some men consume ideas and return unchanged. Others recognize that internal state requires structure, repetition, and discipline. This channel, Coded Psychology, exists for that reason. Not to motivate, not to flatter, but to expose the mechanisms most people never consciously examine. In the next block, the final structure will be revealed clearly, not as a trick, not as manipulation, but as a psychological reorganization. How containment replaces effort, how direction replaces persuasion, how presence replaces performance, and why ignoring this costs men far more than rejection. At some point, every man reaches a silent crossroads. He can keep trying to be chosen, or he can become someone who does not need to be. Most never notice this moment because it does not announce itself. There is no rejection, no argument, no dramatic ending. There is only a gradual erosion of influence. Messages answered more slowly, conversations that lose weight, interest that fades without explanation. And the man assumes the problem was timing, compatibility, or luck. It wasn't. It was internal position, the core mechanism. The deepest mistake men make is believing attraction is something they generate outwardly, through words, through gestures, through effort. But attraction is not generated, it is allowed. It emerges when resistance inside the man collapses. Resistance to silence, resistance to uncertainty, resistance to not being immediately validated. The man who cannot tolerate ambiguity tries to control it. The man who tolerates it becomes the reference point. And reference points shape emotional gravity. This is why presence matters more than performance. Performance seeks reaction. Presence sets conditions. When a man performs, he places himself inside the interaction, subject to its outcome. When a man is present, the interaction unfolds inside his frame, and frames decide meaning. Here is where many get uncomfortable, because this has nothing to do with dominance over others, and everything to do with dominance over impulse. The impulse to explain, the impulse to fill silence, the impulse to secure reassurance. Each time a man resists these impulses, something reorganizes internally. His nervous system stops leaking urgency, and urgency is the loudest signal of low leverage. Why ignoring this costs power? Men don't lose influence because women are unpredictable. They lose influence because they broadcast instability. Instability in pace, instability in tone, instability in emotional regulation. And the human mind does not surrender attention to instability. It monitors it. It distances from it. It avoids anchoring to it. This is why many men feel invisible even when present. They are physically there, but psychologically uncontained, Their attention spills outward. Their emotions fluctuate with reaction. Their posture adjusts in search of approval, and without a stable center, nothing can orbit. The man who holds center does not demand alignment. Alignment happens naturally around him, not because he dominates, but because his internal order reduces friction. The final reframe. Most men believe women respond to confidence. They don't. They respond to self-sufficiency. Confidence can be loud. Self-sufficiency is quiet. Confidence often seeks confirmation. Self-sufficiency does not require it. And the nervous system trusts what does not ask to be trusted. This is why attempts fail, where stillness succeeds. Stillness signals completion. A man who is complete does not chase closure. He allows it to approach him, and this reverses the entire emotional equation. At this level, attraction is no longer something the man tries to control. It becomes a byproduct of internal structure. His decisions slow down. His reactions soften. His attention becomes selective, and selectivity creates value without announcement. The payoff, the real secret. The three things women respond to but rarely articulate are not behaviors. They are states: containment instead of exposure, choice instead of pursuit, presence instead of intensity. None of these can be faked for long. They must be built internally through awareness, repetition, and restraint. And once built, they operate automatically. This is why the shift feels irreversible. Once a man stops negotiating his worth internally, the external world recalibrates, not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. The anxious man reacts. The centered man conducts. The anxious man adjusts himself to the moment. The centered man becomes the moment's structure. And structure always outlasts noise. Final identity statement. The man who understands this does not chase attention. He does not manage perception. He does not seek explanation. He moves slower, speaks less, and remains internally aligned regardless of response. And because of that, his presence carries weight. This is the difference between men who are remembered and men who are merely experienced, between men who pass through attention and men who reorganize it. Some will hear this and feel discomfort, then return to old patterns. Others will recognize the truth immediately, not because it is pleasant, but because it explains everything that never made sense before. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. That is the cost of real understanding, and also its power.